In fact, present-day communities across the world are the result of ecological succession that took place over several million years. It is assumed that succession and evolution are parallel processes in operation since time immemorial. All communities undergo constant changes in their composition and structure in response to changes in environmental conditions. These changes take place in a sequential and orderly manner, leading to a climax community which is in near equilibrium with the environment. For example, in the ecological succession from a pond to a forest, the climax community is the forest. Also, in the process of ecological succession, the sequence of communities that replace one another in a given area is known as a seer or seers. Each transitional community is called a seeral community or a seeral stage. In each successive seeral stage, the diversity of plant and animal species increases along with an increase in the number of species and total biomass. But what causes ecological succession? Primarily, there are two causes for ecological succession: biotic factors and physiographic factors. Biotic factors include interactions between different organisms in a community, leading to changes in composition, structure, and functions in that community. Physiographic factors, on the other hand, include physical factors like floods, erosion, and landslides, and chemical factors like nature of soil and water. Furthermore, ecological succession is of two types: primary and secondary. Primary succession is a type of biotic succession that takes place in areas where no life previously existed. Some such areas include bare rock, new islands exposed out of the sea, sand dunes, and newly created lava or a pond. The process of primary succession takes a very long time. A possible reason being that soil is required for the creation of new biotic communities, and the process of soil formation takes several hundred or thousand years, depending on climatic conditions. Conversely, secondary succession is a type of biotic succession that takes place in areas that once had an existing biotic community, which was wiped out due to reasons like earthquakes, landslides, or fire. As secondary succession takes place in areas which once had congenial conditions for the existence of life, along with some existing soil or sediments, the time taken for this type of succession is comparatively less than for primary succession. However, at any time during the process of primary or secondary succession, man-made or natural disturbances can result in a particular seeral stage being converted to an earlier stage. Now, let's learn about the process of ecological succession in plants. Based on the nature of the habitat, ecological succession of plants is categorized as hydrarch, mesarch, and xerarch. When succession takes place in regions with plenty of water, such as swamps, ponds, or lakes, it is known as hydrarch. Here, the succession series progresses from hydric or highly wet conditions to mesic or medium water conditions. On the other hand, when succession takes place in regions with moist, well-aerated soil, it is known as mesarch. Finally, succession in regions with minimum moisture, such as rocks and deserts, is known as xerarch. Here, the succession series progresses from xeric or highly dry conditions to mesic conditions. The species that invades a bare area during primary succession is known as the pioneer species, and it varies depending on the area where the succession is taking place. The pioneer species is usually the lichens when primary succession takes place on a rock. Lichens have the ability to secrete acids that dissolve rocks, helping in the processes of weathering and soil formation. The small amount of soil thus formed leads to the growth of plants like bryophytes or moss, which over a period of time get replaced by bigger plants like herbs and shrubs. After several succession stages, big plants get replaced by trees, leading to a stable climax forest. These are images of a terrestrial and an aquatic ecosystem. You can see that in both these ecosystems, the energy flow begins with the sun. In fact, the sun is the only source of energy for all ecosystems on Earth except for the deep-sea hydrothermal ecosystem, whose primary source of energy is the heat produced inside the Earth's crust. Of the sun's incident radiation, less than 50% is photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR, which is the spectral range of solar radiation that can be used by green plants for photosynthesis. However, in reality, plants utilize only about 2 to 10% of PAR, and incredibly, this small amount of energy sustains the whole world. In all ecosystems, the solar energy tapped by plants or producers is converted into chemical energy and is passed on to all other organisms. All organisms which are directly or indirectly dependent on producers for their food are known as consumers. Hence, there is an unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to consumers. This flow of energy in the ecosystem can be depicted by a food chain, which also shows the interdependence of organisms. Here we can see that producers are food for herbivores, which in turn are food for primary carnivores. Likewise, primary carnivores are food for secondary carnivores. Thus, the energy of an organism in general does not remain inside it, but either flows to consumers or to decomposers when it dies. Now, in nature, there are two types of food chains: grazing food chain or GFC and detritus food chain or DFC. Most ecosystems in nature follow the GFC. In a GFC, the energy flows from producers to grazing herbivores and finally to carnivores. Here we can see that the grass, deer, jackal and lion form a simple GFC. Another example of a GFC is an aquatic food chain comprising phytoplankton, zooplankton, small fish and large fish. The second type of food chain, that is the DFC, begins with detritus or dead organic matter, which forms the primary source of energy. This detritus is broken down into simple inorganic materials by digestive enzymes secreted by decomposers or saprophytes and is then absorbed by them to meet their nutrient requirements. Detritivores or decomposers may be consumed by detritivore consumers, which, in turn, may be preyed on by small or large carnivores. The DFC is usually shorter than a GFC. An interesting fact about GFC and DFC is that they may be connected at certain levels. This happens when an organism belonging to the GFC dies and enters the DFC, or when omnivores such as crows prey on organisms from the DFC. Such interconnection of food chains leads to the formation of a food web. It is also seen that the GFC forms the main channel for energy flow in aquatic ecosystems, while in terrestrial ecosystems, most of the energy flows through the DFC. Now, all organisms in a food chain occupy a specific place in the ecosystem depending on their source of food and nutrition, which is known as their trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, followed by herbivores and finally carnivores. Also, the amount of energy decreases in successive trophic levels, and organisms at each trophic level fulfill their energy requirements from organisms at the lower trophic level. In addition, each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time, known as standing crop. It is measured as the biomass or the mass of living organisms or the number in a unit area, and is expressed either as fresh or dry weight. However, the number of trophic levels in a GFC is restricted and is anywhere between 3 and 5. This is because the transfer of energy follows a 10% law. That is, on average, only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to another, while the rest is used up for metabolic activities of individuals or is lost as heat. Moreover, all ecosystems abide by the first and second laws of thermodynamics. This is because energy is being converted from one form to another as it is transferred from the sun to various organisms. In addition, the biosphere is continuously losing usable energy in the form of heat, thereby requiring the continuous supply of energy to organisms for the synthesis of molecules to resist the natural tendency of increasing disorderliness. Hence, we have seen that there is a continuous supply and flow of energy in all ecosystems, and this is vital for the sustenance of our biosphere. Any organic material present on this earth is used and reused again and again. For example, in a forest ecosystem, plants produce organic material or nutrients using the sun's energy, which is passed on to herbivores when they consume plants. The herbivores in turn are consumed by carnivores, and in this process, the organic matter is passed along to various animals. When these animals die, the organic material from each of them is made available to plants by decomposers. Therefore, organic matter or nutrients are never lost from an ecosystem, but are recycled over and over indefinitely. This cyclic movement of nutrient elements between organisms and the environment is known as nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycles. Here, bio refers to living organisms and geo refers to water, rocks, air and soil on the earth, and chemical refers to nutrients such as carbon, phosphorus, calcium and iron, to name a few. Now, nutrient cycles are of two types, gaseous and sedimentary. In gaseous cycles, the atmosphere is the main reservoir of nutrients, whereas in sedimentary cycles, soil, rocks and minerals of the Earth's crust are the main reservoir of nutrients. Reservoirs serve to replenish nutrients in case of any imbalance arising out of variations in the rate of influx and efflux in the biosphere. The rate of release of nutrients into the atmosphere in both gaseous and sedimentary cycles is regulated by biotic factors or living organisms, as well as abiotic factors such as soil, temperature, moisture and pH. At any given time, the amount of nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium and carbon in soil is known as standing state. There are several important nutrient cycles that sustain life on Earth. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon and water are some of the important gaseous cycles, while phosphorus, calcium and iron are some of the important sedimentary cycles. Let's learn in detail about the carbon and the phosphorus cycle. The carbon cycle is an important gaseous cycle. In fact, carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe and the principal constituent of all living organisms on Earth. It constitutes 49% of dry weight of organisms and forms one of the major components in living organisms other than water. The carbon cycle describes the movement of carbon in its many forms between the atmosphere, land, water, and living and dead organisms. About 71% of global carbon is found dissolved in oceans, while just 1% is found in the atmosphere. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is regulated by the oceanic reservoir of carbon. Another reservoir of carbon is fossil fuels. Also, a large amount of carbon is contributed to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide during respiration by producers and consumers. Decomposers are also major contributors to the carbon pool. They break down waste materials and dead organic matter and return carbon to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Natural events like forest fires and volcanic activities also release carbon dioxide. Apart from these sources, human activities like burning of wood and fossil fuels and rapid deforestation has also led to a marked increase in the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Thereby affecting the carbon cycle and leading to the greenhouse effect. Have you ever wondered how this carbon cycle works? It starts with the process of photosynthesis, where green plants fix atmospheric carbon dioxide into organic compounds. Now, carbon in these plants is passed on to herbivores and then to carnivores. When these living organisms, including plants, respire, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. Similarly, after animals die and decay, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere by the action of decomposers. Furthermore, the carbon in some dead organic matter is eliminated from active circulation as it remains buried, forming sediments, which, with the passage of time, form fossil fuels like coal, petroleum, and natural gas, and these too, when burnt, release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Once again, the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere is used by plants during the process of photosynthesis, thereby completing the carbon cycle. Like carbon, phosphorus also plays a very important role in the living world. It is a major constituent of the cell membrane, nucleic acid, teeth, bones, and cellular energy transfer systems in all living organisms. Now, let's understand the working of the phosphorus cycle, whose natural reservoirs happen to be rocks, which contain this nutrient in the form of phosphates. When rocks weather, small amounts of phosphates dissolve into the soil and is absorbed by plants. The phosphates then get passed on to animals when they consume plants. Once these animals die, phosphate solubilizing bacteria act on their bodies and release phosphates into the soil, thereby completing the phosphorus cycle. However, unlike the release of carbon into the atmosphere in the carbon cycle, there is no release of phosphorus into the atmosphere in the phosphorus cycle. Furthermore, inputs of phosphorus through rainfall are much less than that of carbon. Also, unlike in the carbon cycle, there is very little gaseous exchange of phosphorus between living organisms and the environment in the phosphorus cycle. However, the phosphorus cycle, along with other nutrient cycles, play a very important role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. Healthy and functioning ecosystems offer us a wide range of products and services known as ecosystem services. Some of the products provided by a healthy ecosystem include fruit, pure drinking water, food crops, spices, fiber, energy, and medicinal plants, among other things. A healthy ecosystem also provides us services or performs functions such as purifying water and air, maintaining soil fertility and wildlife habitats, pollination, nutrient cycling, mitigating floods and drought, and providing storage sites for carbon. However, it is difficult to assess the value of these different products and services provided by an ecosystem. But today, researchers like Robert Constanza and his colleagues are trying to assess the value of the different ecosystems, which are otherwise taken for granted as they are available freely. Researchers have found that the value of fundamental ecosystems is an average $33 trillion a year. Of the total cost of different ecosystem services, 50% is accounted for by soil, less than 10% each by services such as nutrient cycling and recreation, and about 6% each by services like wildlife habitat and climate regulation. Thus, our ecosystems are of great value. However, their services and products are limited, and so efforts must be taken to preserve natural ecosystems for the sustenance of human life.